We were even then, and we've never crossed each other's paths since then. Now, in all of these stories, think of them as list prices. So take 3 10s and a 5, and you'll be closer to the truth. Some of the stories about my favorite people, and yeah, some of my favorite people. Mary Lou and I were celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary, and she said, let's go someplace where it's not a convention, like, you know, a group like this, and so we can be alone and we don't run into anybody. So she'd never been to New Orleans, and I said, let's go to New Orleans. There's no meetings there, I promise, no business. I won't call in the office, no matter what. So we get there in the afternoon, we check into the hotel, and so we go out and walk down in the, it's not the Village, what do you call it, French Quarter. Who the first one we run into is Howard Harper. If you know Howard Harper, he's about 300 pounds, he's 6'4", and I said, what the are you doing here? God dang it. What are you doing here? And Mary Lou's appalled, and Howard says, what did I do? Why are you screaming and swearing at me? And he says, I promised, Mary Lou, from my heart that I wouldn't meet anybody in the fastener business. So he said, geez, I'm sorry. And I said, okay. He left. And about that time, we were both doing business with John Harrington, so we did have a few things to talk about. And then we ran into Carol and Harry Branson and a few others. There was a hardware supplier meeting there in town. So the next morning, Mary Lou and I come out of the hotel. We're going to walk around, and we get down. It's kind of sunny. She says, I'm going up to the room. I forgot my sunglasses. So Mary Lou goes up to the room, and I'm standing there on the street corner and just minding my own business. And who comes down the street again but Howard? He says, get out of here, man. You're going to get me killed. Next thing I know, Mary Lou comes downstairs. I knew I couldn't trust you. I just knew I couldn't trust you. Now, I'm sure that's happened to all of you guys at these fastener meetings. Last Monday night, I saw George and Barbara Bush on TV, and it reminds me of an interview I had one time. Of course, this is one of those things where you spend $1,000 and you go and get your picture taken with them and so forth. And he says, George, what business are you in? And I said, well, I'm in bolts and nuts. He said, well, that's interesting. He said, during World War II, Barbara worked for a period of time at RB&W, and she had a job there answering the phone. So I think it's interesting to note. And I told this to Jack Lorman, who was president of the company. He didn't even know that. And I think it was interesting to note that we have had a good friend in Washington, and Barbara Bush, who had been in the fastener industry. Okay, now I'm lost. I'll have to figure out where I left my notes here. Back over here. A little side note here. I'm glad to see the IFI is represented here this morning. But I didn't know that they'd moved to Oregon. I'm sure Charlie Wilson will be excited. Is the IFI company here this morning?
Not that one.
Well, forget that. Forget that note. I have a lot of stories to tell, and all of you do, but I'd like to just mention a few things here. I think the biggest boner that I can remember in this industry is first of all, I think Lamson and Sessions should have never gotten out of the fastener business. I think they were too good a company. But I think they had an attitude problem, and one of the reasons we went into the NFDA is that we heard Lamson's had dropped out because he allowed the importers to come in. And that's a fact. They dropped out, and I can't remember, it's probably Eric when he went in. I don't remember, but we thought that was the time to go in. I think that was a real basic business decision on their part that was wrong. Does anybody have a definition of the word characters? Because I don't want to insult anybody by this. I mean, it's not they're good or bad. It's just that they kind of stood out in my life in the industry. So take it for that. Some of them aren't with us. No. I mentioned to Vicki, I said, you know, it's about time you changed this breakfast meeting. You had some real characters here, but I'm not one of them, and so I'm glad you changed the pattern. Well, I'll go through this, and I don't mean anything bad by it, but just in my years in the industry. From New Jersey, Eric Cohen. I had a lot of fun with Eric, and we were on the platform a lot of times, and we had a lot of fun taking jabs at each other, and he was always trying to tell me how to run my business, but he didn't listen to what I told him either. From the Southwest was Jack Pye. Jack Pye was a good friend. I remember one time when he had lost Armco, and I asked him if he'd like to represent us and sell some structural bolts. So we went in and called on Joe Haynelt over there at, what's his name?
Gulf Coast.
Gulf Coast. And he said, Joe, we talked to Joe for a while, and Joe said, you want to see the warehouse? I said, well, of course, I'd love to see the warehouse. I jump out of my chair, and I look at Jack, and he says, you've seen one goddamn warehouse, you've seen them all. And that was it. So I consider him one of the best salesmen that I ever worked with. Then I found out later that they were in condominium deals, that they were great friends, so then I understood. From California, I have Pell-Mell Kirshner. I think Pell-Mell, or Mel is his name, I guess. I think he stands out. He's brought a lot to the industry and a lot of fun. Of course, you worked with him, so you could probably tell a lot of war stories. You're probably on this program after me here at the next breakfast meeting.
My lips are sealed, George.
From Arizona, there's only one person that... do I have any nominations from Arizona? Who this guy might be? Names? He's sitting at the front table. Martin just got back from Europe, where he shipped his Harley over there with Jim Taylor from Semblex, and the two of them rode through... How far did you go?
Down to Italy.
Italy, and then they shipped their motorcycles back. So we're glad to have you here. The way I look at Martin is that I've always heard the expression that the guy with the most toy wins in the end, but I think that he's not waiting for the end. I think he's going to win. Everybody thinks I got a lot of toys, and I do, but I don't have a Hummer, I don't have an airplane, I don't have a Harley, and I don't know what else you got.
A wife?
A wife? Well, I got a wife. But I think you win the toy thing. I think you've got more toys than I have. But the character, I still like you, even though you're on my character list here. Well, from Hawaii. Do I have any nominations from Hawaii? I'm sorry, Bill. That's a timeout. From Pennsylvania, some of us that were in Washington will remember Jerry Rosenstock. Do you want to talk about him, Steve?
No, that's fine.
That's fine. He knew more than all of us, right? He was some. And from the Northwest Oregon area, I've got Ray Bristol. I have a lot of respect for the man, even though he punched me in the nose kiddingly, but he was something else. You weren't coming in his territory without a fight. Is that right? Absolutely. You knew that. From Detroit is Dale Hall. Darling Bolt. Dale had a situation where he felt that you called on a customer once, and that was it. And he'd fly in his airplane. He'd call on you once, tell you what the deal was, and that was it. I was riding horseback with somebody, and they said they met him once. And so the story is true. That's all he felt that he had to do. And he's been very successful in the big bolts, and I have to tell you that he's a very charitable man today. He's enjoying the harvest, and he's doing a lot of good for a lot of people that need help. From Cleveland, there's several nominations, and I'm not one of them, is Leanne Rayburn. Leanne is, how old is she? She's probably 80 years old, and she's a great lady. Her father was a Donahue, and they were tied up with Lamson Sessions. Then they had Donahue Products in Chicago, and she's been around. She remembers the old Fastener meetings where they used to have fist fights and so forth when they'd go to New York. They used to wear tuxes to their meetings, their breakfast meetings. They'd have suits on and ties and everything, not like this. And then the other two from Cleveland is John and Jim Zender. John for Ernest Machine. And maybe some of you don't know them, but these two guys are just great people. And they switch jobs every year. One year John is chairman, the next year he's president. And they switch back and forth, and they've been doing this for years very successfully. Some of the other people that I've known out here is Tucker Nason. I've known him for a long time. He used to be with a company in Cincinnati, Long Lock, I think it was. They make the, it's like Nylock, but they make the long strip. Long Lock, is that it? I knew him way back then, and he used to call on us. Now he's out in California. He was president of the NFDA, and he was a good person. Of course, Larry I've known for a long time, and the guy next to him, Moses. Moses and I have something in common.